Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 10, the Pastimes of Lord Ramacandra, and it's little snapshots of the pastimes of Lord Ramacandra. So we just, where we ended, Ravana was shot. I'll read the verse. After thus rebuking Ravana, Lord Ramacandra fixed an arrow to his bow, aimed at Ravana, and released the arrow, which pierced Ravana's heart like a thunderbolt. Upon seeing this, Ravana's followers raised a tumultuous sound, crying, "Alas, alas, what has happened? What has happened?" See what the Sanskrit is for that. Ha ha. That's the Sanskrit. Twice. As Ravana, vomiting blood from his 10 mouths, fell from his airplane, just as a pious man falls to earth from the heavenly planets when the results of his pious activities are exhausted. And the final sentence of the purport: one should not be proud of one's exalted position and act like Ravana, thinking oneself independent of material laws, material nature's laws. Thereafter, all the women whose husbands had fallen to the battlefield, headed by Mandodari, the wife of Ravana, came out of Lanka, continuously crying. They approached the dead bodies of Ravana and the other Rakshasas, striking their breasts in affliction because their husbands had been killed by the arrows of Lakshmana. The women embraced their respective husbands and cried piteously in voices appealing to everyone. "Oh, my Lord, oh Master, you epitomize trouble for others, and therefore you were called Ravana." And the word for word Ravana is one who can cause crying of others. Ravana. But now that you have been defeated, we are also defeated. For without you, the state of Lanka has been conquered by the enemy. To whom will it go for shelter? Vibhishana. He's better shelter, much better shelter. Purport: Ravana's wife, Mandodari, and the other wives knew very well how cruel a person Ravana was. The very word Ravana means one who causes crying for others. Ravana continuously caused trouble for others, but when his sinful activities culminated in giving trouble to Sita Devi, he was killed by Lord Ramacandra. Next verse. "Oh, greatly fortunate one, you came under the influence of lusty desires, and therefore you could not understand the influence of Mother Sita. Now, because of her curse, you have been reduced to this state, having been killed by Lord Ramacandra." See, they're giving the credit to her. Purport: not only was Mother Sita powerful, but any woman who follows in the footsteps of Mother Sita can also become similarly powerful. There are many instances of this in the history of the Vedic literature. Whenever we find a description of ideal chaste women, Mother Sita is among them. Mandodari, the wife of Ravana, was also very chaste. Similarly, Draupadi was one of 5 exalted chaste women. As a man must follow great personalities like Brahma and Narada, a woman must follow the path of such ideal women as Sita, Mandodari, and Draupadi. By staying chaste and faithful to her husband, a woman enriches herself with supernatural power. It is a moral principle that one should not be influenced by lusty desires for another's wife. Matravat paradare shu, an intelligent person must look upon another's wife as being like his mother. This is a moral injunction from Chanakya Sloka. Matravat paradare shu, paradravyeshu lostravat, atmavat sarvabhuteshu, ya pashyati na pandita, sa pandita. One who considers another's wife as his mother, another's possessions as a lump of dirt, and treats all other living beings as he would himself, is considered to be learned. Thus, Ravana was condemned not only by Lord Ramacandra, but even by his own wife Mandodari. Because she was a chaste woman, she knew the power of another chaste woman, especially such a wife as Mother Sita. In the pastimes of the Supreme Lord, there's many layers of lessons and many moral lessons and spiritual lessons and transcendental lessons and worldly lessons. I'll discuss one of them. One of them, Uttama Bhakta is not here, right? Uttama Bhakta, if you're listening, I hope I don't forget, because I found an answer to one of your questions. Why was Narada not present? Maybe he'll come and I'll wait till the end. In ISKCON, Prabhupada followers are far more accustomed to hearing Krishna's pastimes. And in hearing Krishna's pastimes, we hear from Bhaktivinoda Thakur a teaching that says, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, teaching that says when Krishna killed demons in Vrindavan, the effect of his killing of certain demons in Vrindavan was Krishna removing obstacles for a sadhaka to achieve prema. And each demon representing an obstacle on the path of sadhana bhakti. Not the same, but something similar is teaching that comes from Ramayana. Ready? It's not allegorical, it's implicit or implied. This is now from Govindaraj. Some of you may recall from Sunday, I showed a picture of Govindaraj, who's is it like 700-800 years after Ramanujacharya, but still, Sri Vaishnava living at Tirupati, made a comprehensive commentary on the entire Ramayana, gathering together commentaries and statements by many of the prior Sri Vaishnava acharyas, and just compiled it in a very systematic and poetic way. One of the teachings of Sri Vaishnavas is the event of Sita being kidnapped came as a result of Sita behaving in a way that Sita had never behaved before. The behavior was a desire separate from Ram. She wasn't desiring in relation to Ram's desire. She was desiring as if a conditioned soul desiring a sense object and wanting to become the enjoyer of the sense object. And that sense object was the deer. And she gave her explanation of how enjoyable it would be to have the deer. You know, in a year's time, very soon, we'll be back in Ayodhya, and you know how much I love the gardens at the royal palace. And if this golden deer was there, it would be so nice. Ram, can you get the deer? And then the next was Lakshman objected, saying, "This isn't it. Whoever's ever seen a deer like this? This is a mystical trick. This is the Rakshasa trick. Don't go for it." And Sita offended Lakshman. She just ignored him and went on as if he hadn't even said anything, which is another mistake, the separate enjoyment mistake and the offending, because according to Govindaraj, consistently Lakshman in the whole narration of Ramayana represents the same as Balaram or Nityananda as the guru. He performs the function of guru for many. It's a function that he performs in Ramayana. Not always, but in many cases. And she offended him. And then not only that, she went on to say, and even if you can't catch him, you can kill him. And if that's not Sita. And if you kill him, then we have a nice deer skin. We can sit together on deer skin. We get back to Lanka. 3 strikes and you're out. That's a baseball term, but she, according to Govindaraj, at that point is now taking the role of a jiva. She, Sita, is not a jiva, but she's taking the role of a jiva that departs from being connected with the personality, Godhead, in loving service. She starts thinking about being a separate enjoyer. Now, it's a pastime, but in the pastime, that's a function. And so Sita gets kidnapped. And the soul becomes taken by Ravana. So in this Govindaraj commentary, it's not saying, the commentaries are not saying this is not an event that happened and it's all allegorical and this means that and so on. However, a substratum of this is Ravana represents the mind, and the mind has 10 senses. The 5 knowledge acquiring, 5 working senses. Ravana's 10 heads, extending from the mind as, to assist the mind. And Lanka represents the place where the conditioned soul goes. And Hanuman represents the guru that has to go carry the message of Ram. Come back. Ram will protect you. So there's, as I said, it's a substrata lying beneath the surface of the pastimes. The pastimes are real pastimes. It's not simply an allegory to teach some lessons of life. But here we have the Prabhupada is making emphasis upon the supernatural power that is given to a woman who has this outstanding quality of chastity. Now there's this, I came across, in preparing for visiting Ayodhya and Chitrakoot, etc., Prabhupada makes reference to this in the purport. There are 5, it's not scriptural, it's just commentators over time have come up with, there are 5 celebrated, outstanding, chaste women, and 3 of them are mentioned here: Draupadi, Mandodari, interesting, and Sita. And the other 2, I've seen different lists, and the other 2 they vary in different lists, but it's kind of a celebrated thing that, as Prabhupada writes elsewhere, shyness is the protection for a woman. Shyness is protection for a woman because it curbs her power, and so it gives her power. Her power is conserved and then exhibited as power by her shyness. And by that shyness, a woman can control a man. That's the saying that goes like that. And similarly here, this chastity, it's Prabhupada's words, it's a supernatural power. And Sita said to Ravana, with my austerities, I could kill you, but I'm not going to waste my power on you. Ram will come. Saying these bold things, even in the midst of being tortured and tormented. But, she was intensely loyal and chaste to Ram. And one who violates that, even attempts to violate that, is destroyed. Their whatever merit, because Ravana was born in a Brahmin family, his father was a very exalted Brahmana, and so forth. And he inherited that good fortune of his father, but he became corrupted. Ravana became corrupted. And in his corruptness, this feature of lust, unbridled lust. And the unbridled lust brought about, there's 7 different curses that Ravana incurred. And he recalls them. They're spoken in the Uttarakanda, and then he recalls them in Yuddhakanda when bad things started to happen. This happened because of curses that came to him from his unbridled lust. So one may ride for some time on some piety, but the impiety is going to catch up. And there's, in other words, there's moral lessons even in the pastimes of transcendence. There's many layers of lessons in the pastimes of transcendence, because the pastime of transcendence includes vipralamba, the mood of separation of Lord Ram from Sita and Sita from Ram, and their unbreakable love for one another, and the intensification of those feelings of love due to circumstance of separation. Now, the circumstance of separation is Sita being kidnapped. But a circumstance of her being kidnapped, Prabhupada explains, and the Bhagavatam explains, actually Sita shouldn't have been allowed to come with Ram into the forest. But because she pleaded and she pleaded and she pleaded, he allowed. But he really shouldn't have taken her into the forest, because he took her into the forest. Then there's he's capable. He's the Supreme Lord. He's capable of dismissing any difficulty. So in that sense, no harm. But the moral lesson is, be circumspect about what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, and not just because there's some petitioning, then you do it because someone's petitioning. You extend protection in appropriate ways. So he didn't, because at least the way that the explanation goes is he wanted to show if you're too much attached, you'll have to suffer. So what does too much attached look like? Where's the sufficient? It's okay attached and too much attached. Where's that line? That's the next question. And it varies. The answer is it varies. But when the position of, for us, the position of forgetting the relationship of things with Krishna, and the attachment becomes stronger than remembering the relationship with Krishna, that's too much. It crosses the line. And then one becomes bewildered, etc. So it's many layers is the point here. And Prabhupada is taking the opportunity here to speak about even Mandodari, the one of the five principal personalities exemplifying chastity. She recognizes Ravana violated that sanctity of Sita, and therefore he was wrong. So it's not to say she thought it was okay what he did, but he got what he deserved. He got what was coming to him. It didn't lessen her feelings, but she understood. And great personalities like Mandodari, it's similar to Draupadi's mood. Draupadi lost her 5 sons. Draupadi could have wanted get back for the person who mercilessly took the life of my 5 sons. But Draupadi, being who Draupadi is, didn't want Ashvatthama to be killed, because the mother of Ashvatthama would have to suffer like she has had to suffer. Kripi, the mother of Ashvatthama, should not have to suffer like this, because at least I have my husband's and she doesn't. Kripacharya had been killed. So Kripi has nothing except one, Ashvatthama, so he should be spared. Now, as it turns out, he didn't stay around with mom. He was banished. And it says in scriptures, in the Acharyas confirm, he went and performed long austerities, and he becomes the next Vyas. Isn't that surprising? Ashvatthama becomes the next Vyas. Very surprising. So it's not like he gave consolation to Kripi, but at least he wasn't killed. He was alive somewhere. She didn't see him, but he was alive somewhere. Something, not the same, but it's something like when Nimai Pandit took sannyas, he wasn't staying at home with his mother, Sachi, but she knew where he was. And from time to time, she would get word about her son. So that was a little reassuring. And regularly, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would send Jagatananda Pandit and others to go to Navadvip and give messages about her son and speak about her son and have her motherly affection to some degree mitigated. Anyway, these finer sentiments are considerations for elevated souls. And those that aren't elevated souls, they do whatever they like. And they bear consequences for doing whatever they like. Continuing. O pleasure of the Rakshasa dynasty, because of you, the state of Lanka, and also we ourselves, now have no protector. By your deeds, you have made your body fit to be eaten by vultures, and your soul fit to go to hell. Pretty strong. Naraka hetave. Atma naraka hetave. Purport. One who follows the path of Ravana is condemned in two ways. His body is fit to be eaten by dogs and vultures, and the soul goes to hell. As stated by the Lord himself in Bhagavad Gita 16:19. Tanaham dvishatakuran samsareshu naradman kshipamya ajastram ashubhan asurishva eva yonishu. Those who are envious and mischievous, who are the lowest among men and are cast by me into the ocean of material existence, into various demoniac species of life. Thus, the destination of godless atheists, such as Ravana, Hiranyakashipu, Kamsa, and Dantavakra, is a hellish condition of life. Mandodari, the wife of Ravana, could understand all this because she was a chaste woman. Although lamenting the death for her husband, she knew what would happen to his body and soul. For although one cannot see directly with one's material eyes, one can see with eyes of knowledge. Pashyanti Jnana Chakshushaha. In Vedic history, there are many instances of how one becomes godless and is condemned by the laws of nature. There was some discussion from the Sunday class that the position of Krishna is in the same category of Vishnu Tattva as Ram, Nrsimha, and Krishna. That Ram, Nrsimha, and Krishna, according to Padma Purana, they exhibit the Shad Aishvarya Purna, or the fullness of the six opulences, and the other Vishnu Tattvas forms exhibit less than the fullness of the Aishvaryas, the potencies, the opulences of Bhagavan. And then from the same Padma Purana reference, it says that Krishna as both the origin of the other forms, and that Krishna is superlative because Krishna gives liberation, whereas the others do not. Now, I'm making reference to this because it's, a person's going to hell being killed by the Lord. Now, Rupa Goswami wrote a book that's now published by the BBT with commentaries this thick. Laghu Bhagavatamrita. Laghu Bhagavatamrita is a book the topic is one. It's avatars of the Lord in its various features, very detailed. And there's a long section where it makes this comparison between what was the destination of Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha, Ravana and Kumbhakarna, and Shishupal and Dantavakra. In short, Shishupal and Dantavakra were liberated, the other two were not. And it gives an explanation doesn't say where they went. We talked about that a little bit. They went somewhere. But here it's mentioning hell, but he didn't go to hell because he was killed by Ramacandra, and therefore he was cleansed of his so many sins. It's like when capital punishment is ordered by the government for one who murders, then the sin for murder is cleansed. So where does the soul go after the sin of murder is cleansed, or the sin of Ravana is cleansed? He didn't go to hell. According to one commentary, without any elaboration, he went to that place in heaven called Vira Swarga, where heroes go. Those Kshatriyas who die in battle go to heaven. And that heaven place, at least one name that's given in the scriptures, is Vira Swarga. And after some time, he again came, but certain remaining tendencies. Well, the sin may have been cleared, the tendency wasn't cleared. And so tendency came out again. There's some further, it's a very long section by Rupa Goswami, making scriptural reference and providing explanations of why it happened the way it happened. So mentioned here is the destination of godless atheists such as Ravana, Hiranyakashipu, Kamsa, and Dantavakra is a hellish condition of life. Now, there was a hellish condition of life during their life, but because they were killed by the Supreme Lord, that reaction was cleared and wasn't a hellish condition after this life. In fact, Dantavakra achieved liberation, and then Dantavakra returned, at least our current Yuga cycle, Dantavakra returned to the Jai Vijay position. So he didn't go to hell. He didn't go to hellish condition. But Prabhupada's making the point. The destination of godless atheists is a hellish condition of life. Mandodari, the wife of Ravana, could understand all this because she was a chaste woman. And she can only imagine what her emotions were. She was feeling attached because she's a chaste woman, but attached to Ravana. At the same time, she's a highly enlightened person that understood he's going to, his destination is not good because of his sinful actions. In Vedic literature, Vedic history, there are many instances of how one becomes godless and is condemned by the laws of nature. It's not solace, because as Kali Yuga progresses, more and more people are doing very wicked things. Very wicked things. More and more. It's not solace, they're going to get theirs. But it's, what do you do about it? The more and more wicked things? Where's the brake pedal? Where's the steering wheel? What do? And if you're fearful, you head for the hills. And if you're courageous, you take up the process that brings elevation and purification of consciousness. There's a YouTube recording of a visit that Prabhupada made to Australia, Melbourne. And it's Prabhupada's visit to a hall at a university. And the program lasted for about 12 minutes because people were really unruly, wild, and so Madhavisa had to stand up and when Prabhupada seated on this really high Vyasasan, looking at what the scene, and this violent and that violent, and the other violent person, communists and Christians, and saying really heavy, looked like it was going to get way out of hand. So they just, everybody, the devotees stood up and just had kirtan. The 12-minute program was over. It happens even in the presence of Srila Prabhupada. So you take shelter of the holy name. Unfortunately, it didn't turn into violence. It just, the rabble rousers left and everybody left. But so for us, living in a world that's crazy, like you were describing this car festival, right? Don't be surprised if something, that hasn't been the same as it's been for so many years happens. It may very well happen. Something crazy happens. During the parade, or what, in relation to us going out and doing what we do, we should be prepared, because it's on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's bringing calm and peace and tranquility and joy to people who are, absorbed in the material energy. And the other hand, there's envious people and crazy people that can do envious and crazy things. It happens. It happens. So that's the end of this narration. Shukadev Goswami now continues. Vibhishana, the pious brother of Ravana and devotee of Lord Ramacandra, received approval from Lord Ramacandra, the king of Kosala. Of course, he's not king yet. Then he performed the prescribed funeral ceremonies for his family members to save them from the path to hell. Purport. After giving up the body, one is transferred to another body, but sometimes if one is too sinful, he is checked from transmigrating to another body, and thus he becomes a ghost. To save a diseased person from ghostly life, the funeral ceremony or Shraddha ceremony, as prescribed in authorized shastras, must be performed. Ravana was killed by Lord Ramacandra and was destined for hellish life. He says it again. But by Lord Ramachandra's advice, Vibhishana, Ravana's brother, performed all the duties prescribed in relation to the dead. Thus, Lord Ramachandra was kind to Ravana even after Ravana's death. Thereafter, text 30, Lord Ramachandra found Sita Devi sitting in a small cottage. We don't hear about the cottage too much. We hear about her underneath a tree in which Hanuman sat and told Ram's story. But here, it's a cottage. So we know how to process that. Different days of Brahma, right? Cottage. In a small cottage beneath the tree named Shim Shapa, in a forest of Ashok trees. She was lean and thin, being aggrieved because of separation from him. Not only because of separation from him, but she hadn't eaten. You get pretty lean and thin if you don't eat. And if she was there for almost a year. Seeing his wife in that condition, Lord Ramachandra was very compassionate. When Ramachandra came before her, she was exceedingly happy to see her beloved, and her lotus mouth showed her joy. Of course, this is a little different. Hanuman was sent to bring her. After giving Vibhishana the power to rule the Rakshasa population of Lanka for the duration of 1 kalpa. Wow. That's a long time. 1,000 yuga cycles. Lord Ramacandra, the Supreme Personality Godhead Bhagavan, placed Sita Devi on an airplane decorated with flowers, and then got on the plane himself. The period for his living in the forest having ended, the Lord returned to Ayodhya, accompanied by Hanuman, Sugriva, and his brother Lakshmana. There's a whole lot of other people that were on that plane too. When Lord Ramacandra returned to his capital, Ayodhya, he was greeted on the road by the princely order, who showered his body with beautiful fragrant flowers, while great personalities like Brahma and other demigods glorified the activities of the Lord in great jubilation. Upon reaching Ayodhya, Lord Ramacandra heard that in his absence, his brother Bharata was eating barley cooked in the urine of a cow, covered his body with the bark of trees, wearing matted locks of hair, and lying on a mattress of kusha. The most merciful Lord very much lamented this. Then comes a long verse series. When Lord Bharata understood that Lord Ramacandra was returning to the capital Ayodhya, he immediately took upon his own head Lord Ramachandra's wooden shoes and came out from his camp at Nandigram. Lord Bharata was accompanied by ministers, priests, and other respectable citizens, by professional musicians, vibrating, pleasing musical sound, and by learned brahmanas, loudly chanting Vedic hymns. Following in the procession were chariots drawn by beautiful horses with harnesses of golden rope. These chariots were decorated by flags with golden embroidery and by other flags of various sizes and patterns. There were soldiers bedecked with golden armor, servants bearing betel nut, and many well-known and beautiful prostitutes. In Ayodhya too. Many servants followed on foot, bearing an umbrella, whisks, different grades of precious jewels, and other paraphernalia befitting a royal reception. Accompanied in this way, Lord Bharata, his heart softened in ecstasy, and his eyes full of tears, approached Lord Ramacandra and fell at his lotus feet with great ecstatic love. Now, in the beginning of this chapter 10, Shukadeva Goswami, having been asked to narrate the pastimes of Lord Ramacandra, speaks some interesting words. There are many versions of Ramayana present today. I'll only speak from the authorized ones, meaning there were many that were not. And even just hearing this little description, probably, I'm guessing, many of us, if not most of us, that are familiar with Ramayana to some extent, we're familiar with Valmiki Ramayana. And the way Valmiki Ramayana describes his entrance is not, first he comes in for a landing at Bharadwaj Muni's ashram, and Hanuman is sent as an emissary. Go find out if Bharata is attached, because if he is, no problem. He can remain the king. And if not, then I can return. So Hanuman goes, and the narration here is different. So now, how do you handle it? It's a different narration. There's different versions of different days of Brahma or different realizations, etc., etc. And it's quite okay, because we know the source, that's Shukadeva Goswami. We have all confidence in Shukadeva Goswami as a source. And we have all confidence in Valmiki as a source. So we read Valmiki Ramayana and we're fine that it says something that's not said here, or something here that's not said there. So now here's, I hope Uttam Bhakta is listening, because one of the devotees that's quite familiar with Ramayana in a way that's pretty astounding. I asked this question Why do we not find Narada Muni in Valmiki Ramayana? We find Narada Muni present by giving instructions as guru of Valmiki, but he doesn't show up in the pastime. So why not? Is there a reason? And I'm going to read what it says here. In the Yuddhakanda, in the first encounter of Indrajit with Lord Ram and Lord Lakshmana, Indrajit wounded the Supreme Lordships by tying them up with a network of serpentine arrows. Both Ram and Lakshmana were bathed in a pool of blood and became unconscious. At that time, the monkeys were contemplating on sending Hanuman to the milk ocean to obtain herbs to revive Lord Ram and Lord Lakshmana. As per the current published Ramayana, Garuda comes to the scene at that point in time of the conversation. On seeing Garuda, the serpents in the arrows run away. Thereafter, Garuda caresses the Supreme Lords to revive them. This sequence is usually present in South Indian manuscript version of the Valmiki Ramayana, which is the one that is widely published now. Paragraph. However, in the North Indian manuscript of Valmiki Ramayana, prior to the appearance of Garuda, Nard appears in the scene and speaks 94 lines of verses to Lord Ram, reminding him of his divinity and exhorting him to action. And then Garuda comes. That's the North Indian version of Valmiki Ramayana. Thus, our understanding of Narada not being present in Ram Lila, except in the beginning of the epic of his interaction with Valmiki, is possibly due to the reading of a manuscript that is not widely published now, or not reading the North Indian Valmiki Ramayana version, and people being more familiar with the South Indian Valmiki Ramayana version. Now, I had no idea that there's a North Indian and a South Indian version, and what the difference is. And there likely there's some other differences. I'm just guessing, but likely, because that's the way it goes. And then, what are you gonna do? Flip a coin and say which is the correct Valmiki Ramayana? It depends on what part of India you're from. It's even more problematic with Mahabharata, for your information. Hridayananda Maharaj some time ago took on the project of making commentary on Mahabharata. He stopped because there's too many, like with a real Mahabharata, please stand up. There's too many versions. So he stopped because scholarly people would poo-poo if it wasn't matching theirs, and then that's not going to match somebody else's, and so he stopped. And I didn't know that Valmiki Ramayana had more than one version. I somehow had the idea, it's like, that's it. Oh. We've come across this multiple times, and here we are with the gold standard Amala Pramana Srimad Bhagavatam, and even at the beginning of this narration, he's selecting from the authorized versions of Ramayana. And how do you process that? In tomorrow morning's, for those of you that won't be attending the morning class at the temple, tomorrow morning, there's a discussion from Canto 4, Chapter 13. And it's the chapter that immediately follows Dhruva goes back home, back to Godhead, chapter 12. At the end of chapter 12, listen carefully, at the end of chapter 12, after Dhruva goes back to Godhead, Narada, who's his spiritual master, is jubilant. And Narada, because that happens, how long did he rule? He ruled for a long time, right? He ruled for a long time, but then he went back to Godhead. So right after that, at the end of that chapter, it says Narada went to where the Prachetas were performing a yajna, and he spoke 3 verses of glorification of Dhruva to the Prachetas. That's chapter 12. In the beginning of chapter 13, there's a question. Maharaj Parikshit wants to know, tell me about the Prachetas. And the answer doesn't come till the chapter 24. And chapter 20, between 13 or the end of 12 and beginning of 13 and chapter 24, there's generations and generations and generations and generations before you come to the Prachetas. And they show up in chapter 24. But it's mentioned in chapter 12. What does that mean? It means that one of the things it means is the Srimad Bhagavatam is not chronological. It's quite logical, but not chronological. And yet it's dealing with chronology. It's lineages of kings. You know, Swayambhuva Manu and so forth. And Dhruva. Swayambhuva Manu and Uttanapada and Dhruva, and then after Dhruva, the lineages of kings. But the Prachetas are mentioned way ahead. And it's not till many generations later. For beginners, it can leave you head scratching. And if you go beyond head scratching and start to read carefully, then the puzzle pieces start to fit together and it becomes at least transcendentally logical, if not chronological. Because it's certainly okay that from Dhruva's going back home, that sometime later, many generations later, Narada is glorifying Dhruva because they are descendants. The Prachetas are descendants. And in fact, that's what Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur says in his commentary. That's the reason it's being brought up at that point, because they're descendants of Dhruva, Prachetas, and Narada is glorifying their previous great personality in their lineage to the Prachetas while they're doing a yajna. He comes and glorifies their ancestor. It's very logical. And Shukadev Goswami, the narrator, says something that's very logical. It's just not chronological. And that's part of how we have to read Srimad Bhagavatam. The speaker, Shukadev Goswami, is very spontaneous. He's on the Raga Bhakti platform. He's not confined to our linear way of doing things and feeling things and seeing things, measuring things. Therefore, from time to time, Maharaj Parikshit has to ask a question to get him back on the chronology track. What happened next? Remember that one? What happened after that? So he does that. And then the puzzle pieces start to fit together again. So you have to read the Bhagavad, you have to read scripture, and certainly have to read Bhagavatam with an open heart, trusting in the composition itself, And you may not understand something right away. That's okay. And just you read it very, very carefully, and things start to fall into place slowly. And then the commentators, they help things fall into place. If you didn't catch it, they help. So we have a few more evenings and one more chapter to go. We didn't finish this chapter yet. So we'll continue tomorrow. Let's see if there's some discussion.
Marge, Uttam Bhakta Prabhu said thank you for the answers.
Okay. There were two other questions that came up, and I don't have answers for those yet. So rather than repeating what the questions are, we'll wait till we have answers. Anyone? You have something? Yes?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. As you were speaking about Sita and the seeming mistakes that she had made and the lessons that we learn from, from her taking on a jiva standpoint,
Taking on?
like the jiva standpoint.
Yeah.
I was thinking about Radharani and like her pastimes, and there doesn't seem to be anything like that within her pastimes where we're like
There's
learning
nothing
lessons
like
from her.
There's nothing like that.
Is there a reason why? It's just like it's
Is there a
just
reason
sweetness
why?
there, and then because she's also human-like.
Reason why? I'll start with saying this. If Govindaraj had not commented the way that Govinda Maharaj had commented, Govindaraj had commented, I wouldn't have thought that thought at all. Because it's in his commentary, it means it's in commentary of other acharyas, and he's just bringing it forward in a very poetic and beautiful way. And the frame of the whole Ramayana it's a treatise on surrender. So many, many, many things, if not all things, many, many, many things are taken as lessons in surrender, or the absence of it and the consequences of the absence of it. And so looking through that lens, as the Sri Vaishnava Acharyas look at Ramayana, they see things that I wouldn't see, and they're bringing them out in ways that they can see because they're looking at Ramayana through that lens. So it's not that Sita becomes a jiva, she is behaving like. And it's a lila so that Sita can be rescued. The soul that goes into the clutches of the mind, it sounds allegorical. And then Ram is searching, when he's searching for Sita, he's, according to Govindaraj, I'll get to your question, but they're looking at Ramayana through that lens. So his searching for Sita is how to get this wayward soul back. The Supreme Lord has enormous concern for wayward souls like us that we don't recognize because we're somewhere else in some other consciousness, and bearing the results of that mistake of trying to enjoy independently. But the Lord has that desire, and he's searching for someone to rescue, to carry his message to Sita. And he says looking for Guru. And he's searching and he examines the qualifications of Hanuman, the commentary describes, and then he concludes, here's my ring. You're going to be successful. Show this to Sita so she knows it's from me. You're my messenger. And she'll be secure that she'll be rescued. So, and then the battle that the Supreme Lord does to help rescue Sita. So it's the lens through which they're viewing Ramayana. And is there such a lens through which the Vaishnava acharyas view Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan? I'm unaware. And if there is, so your question is, why is there not something comparable in Krishna's pastimes with Radha? And there isn't some acharyas helping us to see that which we can't see, in part because even when Radha acts in an apparently contradictory way, it's viewed by our acharyas as a type of ecstasy, of love, which Krishna loves. And she's doing as the pleasure potency of Krishna, according to the happiness of Krishna, although it may look like she's becoming angry with him, etc. Or she says something, abrupt, or something challenging, or something. But it's all out of love. And that's how our acharyas view the loving exchange between Radha and Krishna. Looking at it through that lens, it's why it's not found by our acharyas. And that's the predominance of the sweetness of their pastimes. And not to say there isn't sweetness in the pastimes of Ram and Sita, but the predominance of sweetness that's there in Vrindavan covers over anything and everything.
Thank you.
Others?
So, Guru Maharaj, Vipralamba Bhav that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu exhibited is love and separation. And he showed so many symptoms. When Sita Devi, she was away from Lord Ram, like we read that she was still fixed on Ram. She was, she had the same intensity of love for Lord Ram. Would it be right understanding that she had the same Vipralamba Bhav?
Yes. The arrangement for separation from Sita, again, as I was saying earlier, there's layers and layers of messages and lessons. And one of them was, he was wishing to experience, and he was wishing for her to experience love and separation. And that's one of the layers or lessons. And so that's certainly what happened. It happened twice. Okay. Twice. When she was sent to the ashram of Valmiki. I'm waiting for Uttam Bhakta's jewel. Every class he's got something. Uttam Bhakta, say something. Yes, in the back.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. This is regarding when Vibhishana leaves Ravana.
When Vibhishana does what?
When Vibhishana when Vibhishana leaves Ravana and
Leaves Ravana.
leaves Ravana and comes to surrender to Rama, he just, I'm understanding, he just leaves along with his 4 ministers,
Yes.
right? So sometimes it process, sometimes it goes me like, what happens to his family?
Yeah, he just left without.
just left.
I said, what happened to Vidura's family?
Yeah, same thing. In
He just left. But good news, they were reunited.
Yeah.
And he became the king and she became the queen.
Queen,
Yay. And Vidura,
Mhm.
he didn't say goodbye to his wife. He just left.
Yeah.
And she was a great soul. Great soul.
Yes.
So she must have felt separation from her good husband, Vidura. But he came back
Yeah.
many years later, but he came back.
Same thing, same kind of a pattern I see, like in when Krishna leaves afterwards, Maharaj Yudhishthira, he coronates Parikshit Maharaj, and then he also leaves without telling his brothers or anything. He just leaves, and his brothers one by one they leave, and at the end, Queen Draupadi and Mother Kunti, they also leave. So there is no, I see like the, okay, I'm going. Are you planning to come with me? Kind of a thing. He just leaves like that.
Yeah, we don't do that in ISKCON like that. You know, if the question could be restated, wouldn't it be a proper display of etiquette that we should learn the lesson from to go to their family members, as Ram did, and say what needs to be said to pacify their hearts or something. Now, at least with the Pandavas and Draupadi, it was an understanding. This is my take. Now, I've not read anything specific to this, but it was my understanding that the day will come, and when that day comes, it's going to be abrupt, because their attachment for Krishna is such that they can't bear existing without, when they heard that Krishna had departed, that they couldn't carry on. And their wives and other family members were not only attached to them, but they were also attached to Krishna. They achieved the same destination, but it was a solo journey. It wasn't a hand-holding journey. But that solo journey is accompanying them is the years and years and years of spiritual sangha that existed between one perfected soul and another perfected soul. It's just part of that degree of spiritual elevation that comes for such a qualified persons. And we're not so qualified, so we don't do like that.
Okay. Thank you, Maharaj. Thanks for the clarification.
There are some explanations by Nityananda Pran Prabhu on the question that Sanchari asked, that why Sita Devi was acting like how, or her pastimes were like more human-like and were not matching. Oh, he took them out. Oh, but I read them, so I don't know, maybe he did it on purpose. He deleted them. One of them was
Well, maybe he doesn't want you to repeat it if you deleted it.
okay.
Let's see, he'll put something else in. We'll see if
There
take
were 3 reasons there. So Uttama Bhakta Prabhu.
Nityananda Pran will add something. By the way, that explanation of Ravana representing the mind and the 10 senses is 10 heads, etc. I just heard a recording of the Sunday lecture that Nityananda Pran gave about Prabhupada, because in Naperville, which is a suburb of Chicago, they're installing a murti of Srila Prabhupada next Sunday. It's a big event, it's a big event before the temple opening. And so he was speaking about Srila Prabhupada crossing the ocean to come to America and making a comparison with Hanuman crossing the ocean to go to Lanka. And this little metaphor is something that he spoke that I hadn't heard before he spoke it. So I was just sharing with you without giving him credit. Now I'm giving him the credit. But I'm sure he heard it from probably from Govindaraj or some of our acharyas. Go ahead, Uttam Bhakta.
Although Lord Ram displays all 6 opulences of Bhagavan, yet soldiers do not get spiritual liberation. My understanding is that it's Lord Ram's desire to do it that way, not otherwise. Is that correct?
I'm not sure what he means by it's Lord Ram's desire to do it like that and not otherwise. I'm not sure what he means by that. Krishna exhibits all potencies in full, including this one of delivering. Ram has all potencies in full, minus this one of delivering. And is the question, is that because he wants it to be like that? I guess that's what he's asking.
He's asking, unlike Krishna, I mean, it's Lord Ram's desire not to give liberation to Ravan.
No, that's not it. That's not. It's just it's part of, because he didn't give liberation to anyone. It's part of his pastime, or however you want to say it. The exhibition of his Leela is that he doesn't do that. And it's reserved for Krishna to do that. Are we anything else in the room? Okay, we're good. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.